The waitress paid for a stranger's meal without thinking twice. What no one realized, the vampire king had spent lifetimes hunting for his missing heir, and the boy she just fed was the last piece of a prophecy that binds her fate to his throne. Now please take a moment and subscribe to our channel and comment where you are watching from and what time is it. It is always fascinating to see where these stories get all around the world. Thank you. The fluorescent lights above the counter buzzed like dying wasps, and Maya Torres was 3 hours past, caring about anything except the clock inching toward midnight when the boy walked in. He looked maybe 10 years old, skinny in a way that made her think of stray cats, wearing a jacket 2 sizes too big and boots that squeaked against the checkered linoleum. The Silver Spoon Diner smelled like burnt coffee and old fry oil, the kind of smell that got into your hair and stayed there no matter how many times you washed it. And Maya had been breathing it for 6 years now, ever since her mother got sick, and the hospital bills started piling up like a wall she could never climb over. The boy slid into the corner booth without looking at her, just stared at the laminated menu like it held answers to questions he was too afraid to ask, and Maya poured herself another cup of coffee she did not need because her hands needed something to do. Outside the plate glass windows, Main Street was empty, the whole town hollowed out for Halloween, everyone either at the parties up in Portland or huddled in their houses pretending they were not home. Paper skeletons rattled against storefront windows in the wind, and a jack-o'-lantern someone had left on the bench outside the hardware store grinned with its 3 remaining teeth. Maya checked her phone. 11:47. 13 minutes until her shift ended and she could go home to her apartment with the eviction notice taped to the door and the silence that felt like drowning. The boy ordered a grilled cheese and a hot chocolate, his voice so quiet she almost did not hear him. And when he slid his card across the counter 15 minutes later, the machine beeped twice and flashed red. Declined. Maya watched his face go still, watched him pull the card back and stare at it like he could will it to work through sheer desperation, and something in her chest that had been numb for months cracked open just enough to let the cold in. "You look cold," she said, and pulled her own scarf from her bag. The blue one her mother had knitted 3 Christmases ago before the chemo made her hands shake too badly to hold the needles. "Take this." She handed him the scarf and the receipt, waved away the $14.83 like it was nothing, even though her rent was $485 overdue, and her manager would dock her paycheck for the loss. The boy's eyes went wide, dark brown and too old for his face, and he clutched the scarf like it was a rope thrown to someone drowning. Then he ran, just bolted for the door, the bell jangling violent and sharp, and Maya stood there with the coffee pot still in her hand wondering what the hell just happened. Every light on Main Street flickered. Not just the diner lights, but every street lamp, every neon sign, every porch light for 3 blocks, all of them dimming and flaring in perfect unison, like the town had taken a single gasping breath. Maya's skin prickled. The coffee pot slipped in her grip and she set it down hard, the glass base clinking against the burner. The door opened again. The man who walked in was tall, maybe 6'2", wearing a black coat that looked like it cost more than her car, and moving with the kind of stillness that made her think of predators waiting in tall grass. His face was sharp, all angles and shadows, and his eyes were wrong. Too pale, too steady, like they had not blinked in 100 years. He stopped 3 feet from the counter and looked at the booth where the boy had been sitting, looked at it the way someone might look at a grave. "That boy," he said, and his voice was low and careful, every word measured out like currency. "Did he speak to you?" Maya's pulse kicked up. "No," she said. "Why?" The man was silent for a beat too long, his gaze sliding from the booth to her name tag and back. "Good," he said. "Don't follow him." Then he turned and walked out before she could ask what the hell that was supposed to mean, and Maya stood there in the empty diner with her heart hammering against her ribs and the lights still flickering like Morse code she could not read. She finished closing out the register on autopilot, wiped down the counters, locked the door, and only noticed the business card when she was counting the tip jar. $500 bills, crisp and new, folded around a black card with silver lettering. Blackwood Estate. Come alone. Sunrise. She flipped it over. The back was blank except for a single line in ink that seemed to shimmer under the fluorescent lights. You fed him. Now you owe me an audience. Maya's hands went cold. She shoved the card and the cash into her apron pocket, turned off the lights, and stepped out into the wind that smelled like wet leaves and something metallic she could not name. The street lamp directly above her flickered 3 times, paused, flickered twice more. She did not know why, but she looked up, looked at the light like it was trying to tell her something, and for just a second she thought she saw a shape in the darkness beyond it, too tall and too still to be human. Then it was gone. Maya walked to her car with her keys laced between her fingers, the way her mother had taught her, and did not look back. The business card burned in her pocket like a brand, and she knew, even as she told herself she would throw it away the second she got home, that she was going to go. The man's eyes had been wrong, but the boys had been desperate, and Maya Torres had spent 6 years watching. People suffer because no one gave a damn, had spent 6 years being one of those people, and she was so tired of it she could scream. She drove home through streets lined with plastic gravestones and fake cobwebs, past the closed post office and the shuttered general store, past the sign that said Greystone Falls, established 1824, population 8,000, and wondered when the town had started feeling like a tomb. Her apartment was dark. The eviction notice glowed faintly in the porch light, the red letters stark against white paper. She unlocked the door, dropped her keys on the counter, and pulled out the card. Blackwood Estate. She did not know where that was, but she could Google it, could find out what kind of man left $500 for a $14 meal, and talked about a kid like he was hunting ghosts. Come alone. Sunrise. Maya looked at the cash in her other hand, looked at the eviction notice, looked at the clock on her microwave that read 12:18 a.m., and thought about the boy's eyes, the way he had held her scarf like it was the only warm thing he had touched in years. She thought about the man's voice, the way he had said, "Don't follow him," like it was a warning and a threat and a plea all at once. She thought about her mother, 2 years dead, who used to say that kindness was the only thing that cost nothing and meant everything. Maya set the card on the counter, poured herself a glass of water she did not drink, and stared out the window at the street lamp that was still flickering in patterns she could not decode. Somewhere out there a boy was running, and a man was hunting, and she had just become part of a story she did not understand. The prophecy had activated the moment her blood-warm hand touched the receipt, had sent out a pulse of magic that every vampire in a 50-mile radius could feel, but Maya did not know that. She only knew that she had 6 hours until sunrise and a choice to make, and the $500 in her hand felt less like a gift and more like a chain. She would go. She knew it even as she tried to talk herself out of it, knew it the way you know the shape of your own face in the dark. The vampire king had spent lifetimes hunting for his missing heir, and the boy she just fed was the last piece of a prophecy that binds her fate to his throne. But Maya did not know that either. She only knew that a kid had looked at her like she was the first good thing he had seen in forever, and she could not let that go, could not let him disappear into the night without knowing if he was safe. So she set her alarm for 5 a.m., lay down on her couch still wearing her diner uniform, and closed her eyes against the flickering light outside her window that pulsed and paused and pulsed again like a heartbeat, like a countdown, like the beginning of the end. Maya drove north as the sun bled pink and gold over the Cascade foothills, her hands tight on the steering wheel and the business card sitting on the passenger seat, like an accusation. She told herself she was going to return the $500, tell the strange man to leave her alone, and drive straight to work for the morning shift. but her GPS said otherwise, guiding her up a gravel road that wound through pine trees so thick they blotted out the sky. The Blackwood estate appeared suddenly, a fortress of glass and dark stone that looked like it had grown from the mountain itself, all sharp angles and floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the forest back at itself. Maya parked in the circular drive, her beat-up Honda looking obscene next to the sleek black cars, lined up like soldiers, and sat there for a full minute trying to remember how to breathe. The front door opened before she reached it. The man from the diner stood in the threshold, backlit by soft light that made his pale eyes look almost silver, and he stepped aside without a word. Maya walked into a foyer that smelled like old paper and something metallic she could not name, her boots loud against marble floors that gleamed like ice. He led her to a room with obsidian furniture and windows overlooking mist-covered forests, gestured to a chair she did not sit in, and placed a single sheet of paper on the table between them. In exchange for your continued silence and cooperation, I will clear your debts and employ you as my son's caretaker. Maya laughed, the sound sharp and ugly in the quiet. You don't get to buy people, she said, and he looked at her with those two still eyes and said, I am not buying you. I am offering you a choice you did not have an hour ago. Then he opened a folder and spread its contents across the table like a dealer showing his hand. Her mother's hospital bills, $73,000 in red ink. Her eviction notice, dated 3 days ago. Her college transcripts, the ones that said she had been 2 semesters away from a teaching degree before the money ran out. He knows everything, Maya thought, and the violation of it hit her like a fist to the stomach. She was halfway to the door, fury making her hands shake, when she saw the boy at the top of the stairs. He was clutching her blue scarf, the one her mother had knitted, holding it against his chest like a lifeline, and his eyes were pleading and ancient, and so full of hope it made her want to scream. Maya stopped. The boy took one step down, then another, moving like someone who expected to be struck. Can you write? Maya said, her voice rough, and the boy nodded. He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket, unfolded it with careful fingers, and held it out. The handwriting was shaky, but legible. Thank you for the food. It was the first kindness in a long time. Maya's anger cracked down the middle. She looked at the man, at Theron Blackwood, who stood there in his expensive coat, with his hands behind his back like a general surveying a battlefield. Tell me what this is about, she said. All of it, no more games. Theron's expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes, something that might have been relief or might have been resignation. Sit, he said, please. Maya sat. The boy came down the stairs and stood beside Theron's chair, not quite touching him, and Theron's hand moved fractionally toward the boy before stopping, like he had forgotten how to offer comfort. His name is Eli, Theron said. He is my son. 247 years ago, a witch came to my court asking for my hand in marriage. I refused. She cursed Eli the next dawn. The curse binds him in this body, steals his voice, ensures he cannot age or heal or die. I have spent 2.5 centuries searching for a way to break it. Maya looked at the boy, at Eli, who was watching his father with an expression she could not read. Why him? She said. Why punish a child for your choice? Because she knew it would hurt me more than any wound she could inflict on my flesh, Theron said, and his voice was flat, empty of everything except truth. She wanted me to spend eternity watching my son suffer, unable to help him, unable to save him, and she nearly succeeded. Maya's throat tightened. Nearly, she said. Theron pulled another paper from the folder, this one old and yellow, covered in script she could not read. The prophecy, he said. Written the night Eli was cursed. It says only a mortal of the founding line who gives freely without debt can break the curse. Your ancestor, Maya Torres, was one of 3 people who founded Greystone Falls in 1824. You are her direct descendant. The moment you paid for Eli's meal, the moment you gave him your scarf without asking for anything in return, the prophecy activated. You have 72 hours to perform a blood kiss, a vampiric bonding ritual, or Eli remains cursed forever. Maya stared at him. A blood kiss, she repeated, and Theron nodded. It requires your consent, he said. I will not force it. But if you walk away, my son stays a prisoner in his own skin, and the man hunting him will burn this town to ash to claim the prophecy's power. Who? Maya said. Lord Kale, Theron said. A rival who wants my throne. If he can control Eli, control the prophecy, he can use it to shatter the conquered, the treaty that keeps peace between vampire courts. Thousands will die. Your town will be the first casualty. Maya looked at Eli, who was watching her with eyes that had seen 247 years of suffering, and felt something in her chest twist so hard she could not breathe. This is insane, she said. You are asking me to trust a man who stalked me, who knows everything about my life, who is telling me vampires are real, and my dead ancestor signed me up for some kind of magical contract. Theron leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. I am asking you to save my son, he said. Everything else is negotiable. Maya wanted to leave. She wanted to walk out the door, drive back to her apartment, pretend this was a nightmare she could wake up from. But Eli was standing there with her, mother's scarf pressed to his chest, and his eyes full of a hope she recognized because she had seen it in her own mirror every morning before her mother died. The hope that someone, anyone, would care enough to stay. What happens if I do this? She said. If I say yes? Theron's expression shifted, something that might have been gratitude flickering across his face before it smoothed back into control. The blood kiss will break the curse, he said. Eli will be freed. You will carry a mark, a psychic tether that binds you to my lineage. You will still be human, but different, vulnerable to anyone who wants leverage over me. And Kyle, Maya said, if he is coming, if he wants to burn my town, what stops him just because I break the curse? Nothing, Theron said. But if the curse is broken, the prophecy is fulfilled. Kale loses his weapon. We can fight him on even ground. Maya closed her eyes. She thought about her mother, who used to say that you could measure your life by the moments you chose to be brave instead of safe. She thought about the boy, about Eli, who had been 10 years old for 2.5 centuries because his father's enemy wanted revenge. She thought about the $500 in her pocket that could pay her rent, could buy her a month of breathing room, and how small that felt compared to the weight of a child's silent suffering. When she opened her eyes, Eli was holding out a piece of paper. She took it. The handwriting said, "You do not have to do this. I have lived this long." Maya pulled a pen from her purse, wrote beneath his words, "You should not have to." Then she looked at Theron and said, "I want the truth. No more surprises. If I do this, if I agree, you tell me everything. What the ritual does, what it costs, what happens after." Theron nodded. "You have my word," he said, and Maya believed him because his voice carried the weight of centuries and because Eli was watching his father like he was waiting for him to lie. "All right," Maya said. "Tell me about this blood kiss." Theron explained. The ritual required her blood, her consent, and a binding phrase spoken in a language older than English. It would create a permanent connection between her and Eli, a thread that would let him draw on her mortality to shatter the curse's hold. She would feel his emotions sometimes, and he would feel hers. The mark would appear on her wrist, a silver pattern that looked like frost, and any vampire who saw it would know she was under Theron's protection. Or his control, Maya said, and Theron's jaw tightened. "Protection," he said. "I will not use you as a pawn." Maya wanted to believe him. She looked at Eli, who had moved closer, who was watching her with something that looked like trust. and felt the anger inside her shift into something harder and sharper. "Fine," she said. "I will do it. But not because you offered me money or because you stalked my entire life. I am doing this because that kid deserves better than being a weapon in someone else's war." Theron stood, his movements precise and controlled, and for the first time since she walked into this house, Maya saw his hands shake. "Thank you," he said, and the words sounded like they cost him something. Eli's face crumpled. He crossed the space between them in 3 steps and wrapped his arms around Maya's waist, his small body trembling, and Maya held him because she did not know what else to do. Outside the windows, the mist was burning off, revealing the forest and the mountains beyond, and somewhere in the distance, Maya knew, a man named Kael was coming to burn her world down for the sake of power and prophecy. Maya told Theron she would stay for 24 hours to think about it, but only if he answered one question honestly, and when he nodded, she asked the thing that had been clawing at her since he explained the curse. "Why did you not save Eli yourself?" The question hung in the air between them like smoke, and Theron's face went very still, the kind of still that meant he was deciding whether to lie or let her see the truth that lived under his skin. He stood without speaking, gestured for her to follow, and led her down a hallway lined with portraits of people who all had his eyes, that same pale, unblinking stare that made her think of winter. They descended stone steps into cold air that tasted like dust and old magic, into a vault lit by candles that burned without flickering. The archive was enormous, walls lined floor to ceiling with books and scrolls and papers yellow with age, and in the center of the room was a table covered in diagrams that looked like anatomical drawings mixed with star charts. Theron stopped at the table, his fingers hovering over the papers without touching them. "Any vampire who tries to break the curse dies instantly," he said. "Their essence feeds it, makes it stronger. I have lost 12 followers who volunteered to try, 12 people who believed they could outsmart a witch's vengeance." The first one lasted 3 seconds, the last one made it to 5. Maya's breath caught. "The witch designed it so only a mortal could save Eli," Theron continued, and his voice was flat, empty of everything except exhaustion. "She wanted me to spend eternity begging humans for help. She knew what that would cost me. A king, on his knees, asking mortals to care about a child they have no reason to love." Maya looked at the diagrams, at centuries of research scratched into paper by someone desperate enough to map every possible solution. "You could have lied to me about all of this," she said. "I could have," Theron said, and turned to face her. "But lies are how I lost him the first time." He paused, his jaw working like the words were glass in his throat. "His mother and I fought about whether to tell the witch no. I lied and said I would consider her offer, bought myself time to find a way to refuse without starting a war. She cursed Eli the next dawn. I have not lied about anything that matters since." Maya felt something shift in her chest. The anger that had been holding her together since she walked into this house, cracking open to let something else in. She watched Theron move to a shelf, pull down a leather-bound book, open it to pages filled with drawings in a child's hand. Ships and forests and a woman's face. The same face over and over, rendered in careful pencil strokes. "Eli's mother," Theron said quietly. "He draws her because he is afraid he will forget what she looked like. She died when he was 8. The curse took him 2 years later." Theron's hands shook as he turned the pages, and Maya saw it then, saw past the cold competence and the controlled voice to the father who had been powerless for 247 years. She thought about her own mother, about watching her waste away in a hospital bed because the insurance would not cover the treatment that might have saved her, about the helplessness that felt like drowning. "I am sorry," Maya said, and meant it. Theron closed the book. "So am I," he said. They stood in the candle-lit silence, 2 people who had lost everything they could not afford to lose, and Maya understood why he had shown her the dossier. why he had laid out her debts and her failures like cards on a table. He was offering her the choice he never had, the power to save someone when it mattered. She was about to say something, she did not know what, when the lights went out. Not the candles, but the electric lights upstairs. The hum of the house dying all at once, and Theron's head snapped up. "Stay here," he said, already moving toward the stairs, but Maya followed him because she was done being told what to do. They reached the main floor as glass shattered somewhere in the east wing, the sound sharp and violent in the dark. Theron moved faster than she could track, his body a blur of motion, and Maya ran after him into a hallway filled with moonlight and the copper smell of blood. She saw the attacker before she understood what she was seeing. A man with eyes that glowed red in the dark, his hands ending in claws that dripped something black and viscous. He was heading for the stairs, for Eli's room, and Theron was 10 feet behind him, too far to stop him in time. Maya did not think. She just moved, throwing herself into the attacker's path, and his claws caught her arm as she fell, tearing through skin and muscle like paper. The pain was white-hot and immediate, stealing her breath, and then Theron was there. He killed the attacker in 3 seconds, his hands moving with brutal efficiency, and the man crumpled into ash that smelled like sulfur. Theron dropped to his knees beside Maya, his hands already pulling off his shirt to press against her wound, and his face was closer than it had ever been, pale and sharp in the moonlight. "You are bleeding," he said, and Maya laughed, the sound thin and shocky. "No kidding," she managed, and Theron's mouth twitched. He wrapped his shirt around her arm, his movements gentle. Despite the urgency, and Maya watched his face, watched the way his jaw was tight and his eyes were focused, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Eli appeared at the top of the stairs, his face white with fear, and Theron looked up at him. "She is fine," Theron said. "Go back to your room, lock the door." Eli did not move. He came down the stairs slowly, his bare feet silent on the wood, and knelt beside Maya. His small hand found hers and squeezed, and Maya squeezed back, even though her arm felt like it was on fire. Theron finished bandaging her wound with his shirt, the white fabric already staining red, and sat back on his heels. "You just saved me," Maya said, and Theron looked at her with those two still eyes. "You saved him first," he said, and the words sounded like a vow. Maya felt something shift between them, the transaction they had started with burning away to leave something rawer, something that looked like partnership. Theron helped her to her feet, his hand warm against her uninjured arm, and Eli stayed close, his presence a small, solid comfort. The house was silent now, except for the sound of guards moving through the east wing, checking for more attackers, and Theron's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, read the message, and his expression went hard. "Kyle's scouts," he said. "Testing our defenses. This was just the beginning." Maya looked at her bandaged arm, at the blood soaking through the white fabric, and thought about the blood kiss Theron had described, about the ritual that would require her to bleed for Eli's freedom. She had already bled for him tonight without thinking twice, had thrown herself between a child and a monster because it was the right thing to do, and she realized with a clarity that felt like falling that she was going to do this. Not because Theron had manipulated her, or because she needed the money, but because Eli deserved to be free, and because she was the only one who could make it happen. "Thank you," Theron said quietly, and the words were raw, unguarded, everything his earlier control had hidden. "For what?" Maya said. "For not running," he said. "For staying, for caring about a boy you do not know, and a fight that is not yours." Maya looked at Eli, who was watching her with eyes that held 247 years of hope and fear, and then at Theron, who was watching her like she was something fragile he was afraid to break. "This is my fight now," she said. "You made it my fight the moment you walked into my diner." Theron's expression shifted, something that might have been respect or might have been gratitude, and he nodded. The guards appeared in the hallway, 6 of them dressed in black, and Theron stood to give them orders in a language Maya did not understand. Eli helped Maya to a chair, brought her water she did not drink, and sat beside her with his hand still holding hers. Outside the shattered windows, the forest was dark and full of sounds that might have been wind or might have been something else, and Maya knew Kael was out there, waiting, watching, planning his next move. She had 48 hours left to decide, 48 hours before the prophecy's window closed and Eli stayed cursed forever. But she had already decided. She looked at the boy beside her, at the vampire king who was barking orders to his guards, while blood from her wound dripped onto his floor, and felt the last of her anger drain away. Theron came back to her, knelt down so they were eye level. "We will keep you safe," he said. "I swear it." Maya touched his shoulder, felt the tension coiled in his muscles. "I know," she said. And then, because she needed him to understand, "I am doing this. The blood kiss. I am saying yes." Theron went very still. "You are certain," he said. Maya nodded. "Eli needs this," she said. "And I think maybe I need it too. To know I did not just survive, you know. To know I fought for something that mattered." Theron's hand covered hers, his skin cool against her warmth, and for a moment they just stayed like that, two people who had been shaped by loss, learning how to hold something fragile and new. "Thank you," Theron said again, and this time Maya heard everything he could not say, all the fear and hope and desperation that lived behind his careful control. Eli leaned his head against Maya's shoulder, and she felt his small body relax, felt the trust he was giving her like a weight and a gift. The house settled into quiet, the guards taking up positions, the broken glass glittering in the moonlight like fallen stars. And Maya sat there with her wounded arm throbbing and a child's hand in hers, and knew that everything was about to change. Theron stood in the council chamber beneath the estate, surrounded by 3 vampires who had ruled beside him for 400 years, and listened to them tell him his son was not worth saving. The chamber was circular, carved from stone that predated Greystone Falls by centuries, lit by orbs of cold light that floated near the ceiling like captive moons. His spies had reported at dawn. Kael was planning to attack during the Founders' Day celebration that evening, a public massacre designed to draw out Eli and force Maya's hand. Theron had proposed evacuating the town, moving every human to safety before Kael's forces arrived, but the council had spent the last 2 hours explaining in patient, condescending tones why that was impossible. "The conquered is absolute," said Helena, the eldest of them, her voice smooth as polished bone. "We do not reveal ourselves to mortals. We do not interfere in their gatherings. If you evacuate 8,000 humans and tell them vampires are coming to slaughter them, every court from here to the Atlantic will declare war on us for violating the treaty." Theron's hands were flat on the obsidian table, his knuckles white. "Kael is going to kill innocent people to get to my son," he said. "We cannot stand by and let that happen." "We can and we will," said Marcus, who had been Theron's general for 3 centuries. "One boy is not worth a war." "He is my boy," Theron said quietly, and the words hung in the cold air like a challenge. Helena leaned forward, her eyes pale and pitiless. "You have always put the kingdom first," she said. "You have sacrificed much to keep the conquered intact. Do not let your personal grief destroy what we have built." Theron looked at each of them in turn, these vampires who had fought beside him, who had helped him maintain peace when it would have been easier to let the courts tear each other apart, and felt something break inside him. "What good is peace," he said, "if I have to watch my sons suffer to maintain it?" "It is the price of leadership," Helena said. "You know this." Theron closed his eyes and saw Eli's face, saw 247 years of silent suffering, saw Maya bleeding in his hallway because she had thrown herself between his son and an attacker without hesitation. He opened his eyes. "I need time," he said. The celebration is in 10 hours. Give me until then to find another solution. The council exchanged glances. You have until sunset, Marcus said. Then we move the court to the secondary location and let Kyle do what he will. Theron left the chamber, climbed the stairs into light that felt too bright, and found Maya waiting in the hall outside. Her bandaged arm was in a sling and her eyes were fierce. You are going to let people die because of politics, she said, and it was not a question. Theron leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the lack of sleep. I do not know how to choose, he said. If I break the conquered, I doom my kingdom to war. If I protect the conquered, I lose Eli forever. And 8,000 people in my town become collateral damage, Maya said. Theron looked at her, at this mortal woman who had been in his world for less than 2 days, and was already demanding he be better than he knew how to be. You have spent 247 years playing by their rules, Maya said. How is that working out? Theron almost laughed. Terribly, he admitted. Then let me offer you a third option, Maya said. She stepped closer, her voice low and urgent. I perform the blood kiss tonight at the Founders' Day celebration. Publicly. In front of everyone. We break the curse, and we use the ritual as bait to draw Kyle into the open. Your guards evacuate civilians under cover of the celebration, move them out in waves so it looks natural. We do not tell them vampires are coming. We just get them clear before the fighting starts. Theron stared at her. That is insane, he said. It is also the only play that saves both Eli and the town, Maya said. Unless you have a better idea. Theron did not have a better idea. He ran through the plan in his mind, looking for flaws, and found a dozen of them but nothing fatal. It could work, he said slowly. But if this goes wrong, if Kyle takes you, he will use you against me forever. The blood kiss creates a permanent bond. You will be vulnerable to any vampire who wants leverage over me. Maya met his eyes. Then do not let it go wrong, she said. Theron felt something shift in his chest, something that had been frozen for decades thawing in the face of her reckless courage. You will still be human, he said, but different. The mark will appear on your wrist. You will feel Eli's emotions sometimes, and he will feel yours. And you will be bound to my lineage, to my bloodline, in ways that cannot be undone. Maya held out her hand. Show me, she said. Theron took her hand, his fingers cool against her warmth, and traced the pattern the mark would make on her wrist. Silver lines like frost, he said. Delicate but permanent. Anyone who sees it will know you are under my protection. Or my control, Maya said, echoing her words from yesterday. Protection, Theron said firmly. I will not use you as a weapon. I know, Maya said, and the trust in her voice made something in Theron's chest crack open. He realized he was still holding her hand, realized she had not pulled away, and for a moment they just stood there in the hallway with sunlight streaming through the windows and the weight of impossible choices pressing down on both of them. I will tell the council, Theron said. We move forward with your plan. Maya nodded. What do you need me to do? Stay alive, Theron said. Everything else, we can manage. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Theron's guards mapped out evacuation routes, planned how to move civilians without causing panic. Maya learned the words she would need to speak during the ritual, practiced the pronunciation until her tongue ached. Eli watched from the corner of the room, his face pale and drawn, and finally pulled out a piece of paper and wrote in his careful hand, You do not have to do this. I have lived this long. Maya took the paper, borrowed Eli's pencil, and wrote underneath, You should not have to. Eli's eyes filled with tears, and he crossed the room in 3 steps, wrapped his arms around her waist, and Maya held him while Theron watched with an expression that looked like grief and hope tangled together. That evening, they drove into Greystone Falls as the sun dipped below the mountains. The town square was transformed, strung with lights and bunting, filled with the smell of cider and fried dough and the sound of a band tuning their instruments. Families clustered around vendor booths. Children ran between the tables with glow sticks, and Maya felt her throat tighten at the normalcy of it, at how fragile and breakable it all was. Theron's guards were positioned throughout the crowd, dressed in civilian clothes, radios hidden in their jackets. Theron himself stood beside Maya, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, and Eli was between them, silent and watchful. At 8 o'clock, they would take the bandstand. At 8:15, the blood kiss would begin. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the lights, Kyle was watching, waiting for his moment to strike. Maya's arm throbbed where the attacker had slashed her, a reminder of how quickly violence could shatter peace. And she thought about her mother, who used to bring her to this celebration every year, who would buy her caramel apples and let her stay up past her bedtime to watch the fireworks. The memory felt like a bruise, tender and aching, and Maya pushed it down because she could not afford to be soft right now. Theron leaned close, his breath cool against her ear. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "Terrified," Maya said. "Good," Theron said. "Fear will keep you sharp." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was rough. "If I could do this without risking you, I would." "I know," Maya said. "But you cannot, so here we are." She turned to look at him, at this vampire king who had spent 247 years trying to save his son and failing, who was about to risk everything on the word of a waitress he had known for 2 days. "Thank you," she said, "for trusting me." Theron's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across his face before he smoothed it away. "You are the first person in centuries who has given me reason to," he said. Eli tugged on Maya's sleeve, held up a folded piece of paper. Maya opened it and found a drawing of the three of them standing together, holding hands, with the word family written underneath in careful block letters. Her vision blurred, and she folded the paper carefully, tucked it into her pocket. "After tonight," she said to Theron, "when this is over, what happens to us?" Theron looked at her for a long moment. "I do not know," he said, "but I would like to find out." Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks, felt the unspoken attraction that had been building between them sharpen into something real. The band started playing, and people moved toward the bandstand, gathering for the opening ceremony, and Theron's hand tightened on her back. "It is time," he said. Maya looked at the crowd, at the families and the children and the people who had no idea what was coming, and felt her fear crystallize into resolve. "Let us give them something to remember," she said. They moved through the crowd, Theron's guards subtly herding civilians toward the exits, and Maya climbed the steps to the bandstand with Eli's hand in hers and Theron at her side. The mayor was introducing them, saying something about a historical reenactment, about honoring the town's founders, and Maya barely heard the words over the hammering of her heart. She knelt on the wooden platform. Eli stood in front of her, his small body trembling. Theron began to speak, his voice carrying over the crowd in words that sounded like music and tasted like smoke. Maya pulled the silver blade from her pocket, the one Theron had given her that morning, and pressed it to her thumb. The moment her blood welled up, dark and warm, she felt the prophecy wake like a living thing, felt magic surge through the air so thick it made her teeth. "Hey!" Eli's eyes went wide and Maya reached for him, pressed her bleeding thumb to his lips, and spoke the words Theron had taught her. The words that meant "I give freely." The words that meant "I choose this." Light exploded from Eli's body, white and blinding, and the crowd gasped. Maya felt the blood kiss take hold, felt the bond snap into place like a chain wrapping around her ribs, and then the screaming started. Kael's forces hit the square from 3 sides at once, 30 vampires moving faster than human eyes could track, and the festive celebration shattered into chaos and blood and the beginning of a war that would reshape everything. The town square was alive with music and light when Maya stepped onto the bandstand at 11 o'clock. Eli's small hand trembling in hers, and Theron moving beside them like a shadow given form. Fairy lights strung between the old buildings cast everything in gold. Families clustered around vendor booths selling kettle corn and hot cider, children weaving through the crowd with glow sticks that left trails of green and blue in the dark. The band had finished their set, and the mayor was introducing them, his amplified voice rolling over the crowd as he talked about honoring the town's history, about the descendants of the founders performing a traditional ritual of gratitude. Maya's heart was a drum against her ribs. Theron's guards were positioned throughout the square, dressed like off-duty security, their eyes scanning the tree line beyond the lights where the forest pressed close and hungry. She could feel the blood kiss mark on her wrist, even though it had not appeared yet, could feel the prophecy waiting like a held breath. Theron stepped to the microphone, and his voice came out warm and human, touched with glamour that made it sound like he had lived in Greystone Falls his whole life. "Tonight we honor the pact made by our ancestors in 1824, he said, "a promise between those who built this town that we would care for one another, that we would give freely without asking for return." Maya Torres, a direct descendant of Maria Torres, and Eli, will perform this reenactment as a reminder of what binds us together. The crowd quieted, curious and patient, phones already rising to capture the moment. Maya knelt on the wooden platform, the boards rough under her knees, and Eli stood before her with his hand pressed over her heart. Theron moved to stand beside them and began to speak in words that tasted like smoke and iron, ancient syllables that made the air thicken and press against Maya's skin. "This bond is iron and glass," Theron said, switching back to English so the crowd could understand the ritual's form if not its truth. "Once made, it cannot be undone." "Do you consent, Maya Torres?" "I consent," Maya said, her voice carrying over the square, and she pulled the silver blade from her pocket. The metal gleamed under the lights as she pressed it to her thumb, felt the sharp bite of pain, watched her blood well, up dark and red. She reached for Eli, pressed her bleeding thumb to his lips, and felt the world fracture. The curse screamed. Maya heard it in her bones, a sound that was not sound, but pressure and vertigo, and the sensation of something massive breaking apart. The humans in the crowd swayed, hands going to their heads, children crying out in confusion. Light poured from Eli's body, white and searing, and Maya felt the blood kiss take hold like a chain wrapping around her lungs. The bond snapped into place, and she gasped, felt Eli's emotions flood through her, 247 years of fear and hope and desperate love crashing into her mind all at once. Eli's form began to shift. His body stretched, growing taller, shoulders broadening, the child's face lengthening into the sharp features of a young man. The crowd was gasping now, phones filming, some people backing away while others pressed closer, and Maya stayed kneeling because her legs would not hold her. The mark appeared on her wrist, silver lines like frost crawling across her skin, and she felt Theron's presence in her mind, a cold, steady weight that anchored her to reality. Then Kael's forces struck. They came from 3 sides at once, 30 vampires moving so fast they were just blurs of motion, their eyes burning red in the dark. The crowd erupted into screaming chaos, people running in all directions, trampling vendor booths and knocking over string lights that sparked and died. Theron's guards engaged immediately, blades appearing in their hands, and the sound of steel on steel rang through the square like bells. Theron pulled Maya behind him, his body a wall between her and the attackers, and she watched him fight with a brutal efficiency that stole her breath. He moved like violence given purpose, every strike precise and fatal, and 3 vampires fell to ash before Maya could process what was happening. Eli was still transforming, light pouring from him in waves, and 2 of Kael's vampires lunged for him. Maya threw herself forward, the stake from the estate's founding tree clutched in her hand, the wood warm and humming with old magic. She drove it into the first attacker's chest, and he disintegrated with a shriek that made her ears ring. The second attacker backhanded her and she flew, hit the bandstand railing hard enough to crack ribs, tasted copper in her mouth. Theron roared, a sound that was not human, and tore the attacker apart with his bare hands. Then Kael himself appeared at the edge of the square, stepping out of shadow like he had been born from it. He was beautiful in the way predators are beautiful, all lean muscle and cold eyes, and when he smiled, Maya saw teeth designed for tearing. He moved toward Eli, ignoring the fighting around him, and Theron intercepted. They clashed in the center of the square, and the impact sent a shockwave through the air that shattered windows in the surrounding buildings. You would throw away your crown for a mortal in a broken boy, Kael said, his voice carrying over the chaos. Theron blocked a strike that would have taken his head off. "He is my son," he snarled, and drove his fist into Kael's ribs hard enough to crack bone. "I already lost everything. This is me taking it back." They fought with a savagery that made the air taste like ozone, two kings who had spent centuries measuring each other, finally colliding with nothing held back. Kael was faster, but Theron was fueled by rage and love, and 247 years of helpless grief finally finding an outlet. He landed blow after blow, his movements a blur, and Maya watched from where she had fallen, her broken ribs screaming, unable to look away. Kael got through Theron's guard and opened a gash across his ribs that bled black in the flickering light. Theron staggered but did not fall, and when Kael lunged for the killing blow, Eli was there. The transformation was complete. Eli stood at his full height now, a young man with his father's pale eyes and his mother's sharp cheekbones, and in his hand was the stake Maya had dropped. He drove it through Kael's chest with both hands, the wood from the founding tree sinking deep, and Kael's eyes went wide with disbelief. "A broken boy," Eli said, his voice raw and unused and shaking with fury. His first words in 247 years. "I am not broken anymore." Kael disintegrated, his body collapsing into ash that the wind scattered across the blood-stained cobblestones. The remaining attackers froze, saw their leader gone, and Theron's guards overwhelmed them in seconds. The battle stopped as suddenly as it had started, leaving only the sound of humans sobbing and running and the electrical hum of damaged lights. The square was a ruin. Vendor booths overturned, string lights hanging in tangles, the smell of burnt sugar and ozone and blood thick in the air. Some civilians were fleeing, some were frozen in shock filming everything on their phones, some were on their knees praying. Theron collapsed. Maya caught him before he hit the ground, her broken ribs grinding together, and she cradled his head in her lap while his blood soaked into her jeans. His eyes were half closed, his breathing shallow, and the gash across his ribs was not healing the way it should. "Father," Eli said, dropping to his knees beside them, his new voice breaking. "Stay." Theron's hand found Eli's, gripped it tight. "You spoke," he said, and his voice was wonder and relief and exhaustion all tangled together. "You are free." Eli's face crumpled and tears tracked down his cheeks. "Thank you," he said, looking at Maya, "for seeing me, for saving me when you had every reason to walk away." Maya could not speak past the lump in her throat. She pressed her hand to Theron's wound, felt his blood hot against her palm, and through the bond she felt his pain and his fierce joy and his terror that this victory had cost too much. The guards formed a perimeter around them, keeping the remaining civilians back, and Maya heard sirens in the distance, police and ambulances responding to reports of an attack. Theron's council would have felt the conquered break the moment the fighting started, would know that everything they had built for 400 years was now at risk. But Theron was looking at Eli with an expression Maya had never seen on his face, something soft and unguarded and human, and when his eyes found hers, they held the same raw vulnerability. "We did it," Maya said. "The curse is broken." "Yes," Theron said. "And now we face the consequences." His hand covered hers where it pressed against his wound, and Maya felt the psychic tether between them hum and strengthen, felt the bond that made her part of his lineage settle into her bones like it had always been there. Eli helped her lift Theron to his feet, the three of them supporting each other while Theron's guards cleared a path through the ruins of the celebration. Maya looked back once at the square, at the people filming and crying and trying to make sense of what they had just witnessed, and knew that nothing would ever be the same. The secret was out. The world had seen vampires fight and bleed and die, had seen a curse break in a wash of impossible light, and there was no glamour strong enough to erase that. They made it to the car as the first police cruisers arrived, as reporters started setting up cameras and asking questions no one could answer. Theron was healing now, the wound across his ribs knitting closed, but he leaned heavily on Maya and Eli, letting them carry his weight. When they reached the estate, when the gates closed behind them and locked out the chaos, Theron pulled both of them into an embrace that felt like coming home. "My son," he said into Eli's hair, "my family." And Maya, standing in the circle of their arms with her ribs broken and her wrist marked and the bond humming between all three of them, felt something she had not felt since her mother died. She felt like she belonged. Maya sat in the library as dawn crept toward the windows, her body aching in places she had not known could ache. Watching Theron heal in increments so slow, she could see each layer of torn flesh knit itself back together. He was sprawled in the leather chair across from her, his shirt discarded to reveal the gash across his ribs that was still angry and red, healing slower than it should because the blood kiss had drained him in ways physical wounds could not touch. The library smelled like old paper and the faint metallic tang of his blood. And through the open door, Maya could see into Eli's room where he slept for the first time in 247 years. His body finally his own, his chest rising and falling with the easy rhythm of someone who had nothing left to fear. Outside, beyond the estate's walls, Theron's council was convening an emergency session because the Concord was shattered, and footage of the battle was spreading across the internet faster than any glamour could contain it. Maya had seen the videos on her phone before she turned it off, had watched herself kneeling on the bandstand while light poured from Eli's transforming body, had watched Theron fight like something out of myth and legend. The secret was out, and there was no putting it back. Theron's eyes were closed, but Maya knew he was not sleeping, could feel through the bond that hummed between them that he was awake and thinking and preparing himself for what came next. She touched the mark on her wrist, the silver lines like frost that had not faded, and felt his exhaustion like it was her own. The psychic tether made her aware of him in ways that should have been invasive, but instead felt like safety, like having someone else help carry the weight she had been holding alone for years. "Do you regret it?" Maya asked quietly, and Theron opened his eyes. "You gave me my son back," he said. "I regret nothing." His hand reached across the space between them and found hers, his skin cool against her warmth, and they sat like that in the pre-dawn quiet, while the world outside prepared to tear itself apart over what they had done. Maya thought about the council, about ancient vampires who had governed for 400 years, deciding Theron's fate, and felt anger rise in her chest. "They are going to make you abdicate," she said. "Probably," Theron agreed. His voice was steady, resigned. "Kael's death and the public exposure give my enemies all the grounds they need to challenge my rule. The high courts will summon me within days. I will be expected to answer for breaking the Concord, for choosing my son over the kingdom's stability." "What will you do?" Maya asked. Theron looked toward Eli's room, toward his sleeping son, and something in his expression softened. "I will be his father," he said. "That is enough. I have spent centuries being a king. I would like to spend whatever time I have left being the parent he deserves." Maya felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back. The bond between them pulsed with his quiet relief, his bone-deep exhaustion, and underneath it all, a thread of something warmer that she was not ready to name yet. She thought about her own mother, about how she had died while Maya was working a double shift because the hospital bills were due and someone had to pay them, about how Maya had not been there to hold her hand at the end. She thought about Eli, who had watched his mother die when he was 8 and then spent 247 years unable to speak her name, and felt the rightness of this settle into her bones. "We are tied to this world now," Maya said. "Both of us. The mark means I am part of your lineage, part of whatever comes next." Theron's thumb traced circles on her palm. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "Terrified," Maya admitted. "But also not. I spent 6 years just surviving, just making it through each day without falling apart. This is the first time I have fought for something that matters. The first time I have felt like I was building something instead of watching everything crumble." Theron pulled her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles that was gentle and reverent. "You are extraordinary," he said. "I have lived 800 years and I have never met anyone like you." Maya's breath caught. She wanted to say something, wanted to name the thing growing between them, but Eli stirred in the next room and the moment shifted. They both turned to watch as he sat up, his new body still unfamiliar, his movements cautious like he expected the curse to snap back into place. He saw them watching and stood, walked to the library on unsteady legs, and sank onto the couch beside Maya. "What happens now?" Eli asked, his voice still hesitant, still raw from disuse. "We figure it out," Maya said. "Together." Theron stood and moved to the window where dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the sky pink and gold. He stayed in shadow, the sunlight stopping just short of where he stood, and Maya and Eli joined him. The three of them stood there, watching the light spread across Greystone Falls, across the town that was changed forever, and Maya felt the bond between them settle into something permanent and unbreakable. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, saw the news alert flash across the screen. "Greystone Falls incident under investigation. Witnesses report supernatural activity." She showed it to Theron and he smiled, exhausted and genuine. "It was bound to happen eventually," he said. "So we deal with it," Maya said. "We," Theron repeated, and his hand found hers again. Eli's hand joined theirs, scarred and steady, and they stood together in the growing light while the world outside tried to make sense of what it had seen. Maya's warm hand, Theron's cool one, Eli's somewhere in between, and the silver mark on her wrist, catching the dawn like a promise. 3 weeks later, Maya was in the estate's training room sparring with one of Theron's guards when she realized the blood kiss had changed her in ways beyond the mark. She moved faster than she should, her reflexes sharp and precise, and when the guard's blade came at her, she blocked it without thinking. The guard grinned and said she was a natural, and Maya felt pride warm in her chest because she was learning to protect the people she loved, instead of just surviving. Eli was in the library teaching himself to navigate modern technology, his 247 years of missed cultural context making everything from smartphones to streaming services a bewildering mystery. He had been 10 when the curse took him, and now he was 20 in body but still catching up in mind. And Maya had caught him yesterday watching cartoons with the kind of wonder that made her heart ache. Theron was in his office when the letter arrived, sealed in black wax with a symbol Maya did not recognize. He opened it, read the contents, and carried it to the fireplace without a word. Maya found him there watching. It burned, the paper curling and blackening in the flames. "Why did you burn it?" she asked. "I am done answering to kings," Theron said. "I have a family to protect." Maya was about to respond when someone knocked on the door. She walked through the foyer, opened it, and found a woman standing on the threshold, with eyes too bright and a smile too sharp. The woman held out a silver envelope. "The courts do not take no for an answer, Theron Blackwood," she said, and vanished before Maya could speak. The envelope fluttered to the ground. Eli appeared beside Maya, picked it up with careful fingers, and opened it. Inside was a single card with 3 words embossed in silver. The reckoning begins. Maya looked at Theron, who had come to stand in the doorway. He looked at Eli. Eli looked at both of them and smiled for the first time since his transformation, a real smile that reached his eyes and made him look young and unbroken and free. "Good," Eli said. "I was getting bored." Maya laughed, surprised and genuine, and Theron's expression shifted into something that might have been hope. They closed the door together, the 3 of them standing in the foyer with the silver card still in Eli's hand and the threat it represented hanging in the air like smoke. But they were together. They were a family forged in blood and magic and choice, and whatever the High Court sent their way, they would face it the same way they had faced everything else. As one. The mark on Maya's wrist gleamed in the light, and she felt the bond pulse between all 3 of them, steady and strong and unbreakable, and knew that the waitress who had paid for a stranger's meal without thinking twice was gone. In her place was someone who had found her purpose in protecting the people she loved, who had discovered that family was not about blood, but about the choices you made when everything was on the line. Outside, the sun climbed higher over Greystone Falls, over a town that would never be the same, over a world that now knew vampires were real and magic existed, and the stories they had dismissed as fantasy were walking among them. And inside the Blackwood estate, 3 people who had been broken by loss and curse and grief stood together in the light and chose each other over everything else, chose love over law and family over power and hope over the weight of centuries. The reckoning was coming, but they were ready.